Y'all didn't think I was gonna actually drop a tutorial and not put in a how-to on all the tricks, I hope. Well, if you thought that, you was dead wrong. So let me clear a couple things up. There's been a few people saying that the counter rotation tricks, so like the weak side or goofy side, the strong side or regular side, whichever you want to label it, switch, goofy, regular, front side, back side, name it what you want to name it. I just wanted to show you the trick. But some people said, hey, that trick really isn't an additional trick. Okay, we can argue that point all day long, but again, always reference it back to board sports. If you're riding a board regular and you do a front side board slide, that's a front side board slide. If you're riding regular and you do a backside board slide, that's a backside board slide. Albeit your body's facing two different directions, the best I can give you is an alternative roll or an alternative direction with the trick that's up there. The other part of that is I wanted to challenge people and also myself to the difficulty of doing something weak side or your unfavorable side or less desirable side. So I'm certain if you've flown enough FPV, you know that when you're out there and you're flying, it is more difficult to go in an opposite direction or a less regular direction. So that's your weak side or your goofy side, whatever you want to call it. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to break it down by my tutorial. So the very first trick is going to be a basic trick. That's the hover. I'm going to walk through, show you guys the hover, and then I'm going to go to an intermediate trick and do an intermediate trick, and then an advanced trick, and then an expert trick. And I'm going to work my way through all the tricks. I'll combine some. So like, let's just say rolls, for example. I'll probably do all 4 or all 6 basic rolls in one shoot. That way you guys know, because they're all generally the same with the exception of the flat rolls. There's a little bit more input on yaw and throttle when you do that trick, so it's a little bit more of a challenge, but I'm still going to put that out there for you guys. But appreciate the love. Stay tuned. Here we go. Oh, and for the frame test, yeah, that's on pause. You guys will see a final product, but it's going to be a minute. That one has stacked up on costs. But other than that, just buckle up. Here we go. All right, the hover. So the hover I like to break down. I put it as number 1 on the basic trick list. However, the hover is arguably one of the most difficult tricks to perfect or master over the span of your hobby or career. It's something I always work fairly regularly because it's hard to control that fine input and keep your drone exactly where you want it. And also hovering is kind of like the foundation for any like landing, perching, looking, staring, just about anything you want to do that requires like slow movement or slow input requires a steady hover. So you've already seen the simulator. There's 100 people that have discussed the best way to practice simulation. So I'm gonna preface this class on spend about 20 to 50 hours on a simulator. Just pick one. Velocidrone's good for racing. It's got good physics. You know, liftoff is a great one. That's probably a great all-arounder if you just want to do a little bit of everything. Physics are okay on that. DRL, if you're just straight into wanting to become a DRL pilot, I don't prefer the physics on that. However, it's still a really good race app, but I digress. So prior to hovering, simulator, pick a radio that you think you're going to grow with and live with. Don't spend a lot of money up front unless you know you're going to stick with the hobby. I would say like $100, $150 for the first radio. And then if you decide to stick with it long term and go places with it, then I would say probably drop, you know, $200, $250, $300 on a radio. I spent about $200. I haven't bought a radio in probably 6 years. Actually, I did. That's a lie. I just recently bought a radio. It was $200. But that's about the maximum I've spent over the last few years. So I won't kick that dead horse anymore. So hovering, let's get to it. So walk with me, walk and talk. So what I like to do is start out big. So find yourself a large field. Or in this situation, I have a field and a parking lot. So what I would do normally is take a spray paint can. I'm not going to spray paint their grass, but what I would typically do is spray paint a large box out in a field like this. And the reason I choose a field is because it leaves a lot of room for error. So if you have a flyaway or you lose orientation, you have plenty of room and space to break that off. Use your AMA field if you don't have some sort of a public space like this to fly in. Again, don't fly if there's people around. I don't do that. You shouldn't either. Once I am comfortable hovering in a large field and a large box, I bring that down to a smaller area, something like a parking lot. And I will use parking lines like this. And what I'll try and do is I'll maintain a tail end hover and I'll keep it in that box and I'll just hover pack after pack after pack. And then from there, I progress that down, and then something like this crosswalk where these little hash marks are, what I'll ultimately do is try and keep my drone within the space of that hash mark. And same thing, I'll hover tail in, and then once I am confident and I feel like, hey, I have a solid tail end hover, then I'll start to yaw the aircraft, and then I'll yaw nose left, nose right, and then ultimately nose towards you, nose in hover. That's the goal. The ultimate goal is you can line of sight hover. So I didn't give you that little nugget. So if I back up, you do see that I don't have FPV goggles on. My recommendation to you is to actually line of sight hover. Do that first. So line of sight gives you a couple of things that are of a benefit. A major benefit, in my opinion, is one, you can visually see what your drone is doing real time in flight, versus in the goggles, you kind of have a skewed perspective of what is happening with your drone. When you're doing it line of sight, you can see your throttle input. So if I give a little bit of throttle, like quarter throttle, I actually see how high the drone comes up off the ground. If I give quarter roll or quarter pitch, I can actually see those inputs directly and instantly with my eyes and see what it does to my drone real time on the ground or in the air in front of me. And I think that builds good structure and also builds good fundamentals and habits, because now you're starting to make a correlation between what your drone is doing relative to what your hands and fingers are inputting it and telling it to do. So all right, here we go. I'm gonna get into this hover. Okay, so I've chosen this diamond. I've chosen this diamond as my start point. That's a pretty good frame of reference for this hover test. And I've also chosen this baseball diamond, this big baseball field, because this provides a couple of different things for me. One is your AMA field likely doesn't have any like cage or net or something to protect your drone from flying off. But in this situation, if you're a novice or a new beginner pilot, control, especially line of sight, is something you're going to be challenged with. So having a guardrail of sorts to keep your drone within the space that you're hovering is a good idea. It'll prevent your drone from flying off and getting away from you too far. And plus the fence here won't damage your drone too badly. Maybe tear up a set of props if you're not able to disarm quickly enough. So the goal here is a tail end hover, and you're gonna find a point on the ground that gives you some level of precision and challenge, and then you're just gonna slowly and gently raise it off the ground, and you're gonna hover. And I'm using my eyesight again to reference what the drone is doing in the air relative to my finger inputs. So now I'm gonna land. I'm gonna point this down in my radio. It's gonna be a little challenging. I should add another GoPro, but you're gonna see the video feed from the camera or on the drone. So here we go. I'm gonna hover again, lifting off. And in the drone feed, you'll see that my inputs are very small, and actually the drone really hovers nearly by itself. Here, I'm gonna tilt this up, and my hands are completely off the radio. Not suggesting you do that first go, but my point here is less is more. All right, less input is more input, and this is where you should really have really fine, really precise control over your drone. That'll give you the best hover feedback. Next, once you're comfortable with the tail end, you're gonna go nose left or nose right, and you see it's a little more challenging, not to mention it's 22 degrees outside right now. But then again, your goal is still to keep that drone over top of whatever the object is, or the box or square that you want to hover over. Once you've mastered that, you're going to yaw the aircraft around, and you're going to do the same thing again. Hover that drone as precise as possible over top of the object that you want to hover over. And then if you get crazy, like, oh, here, oh, I freaked out, I got scared, just kill it, land it, restart. Always restart. She's mad at me this morning, it's cold. Once you've restarted, do it again. And then this time, nose in. So now you want to do a nose in hover. Don't judge me on my hovering, but this is line of sight. There we go. Now nose in, everything is going to be reversed, but you get the gist. And then your goal again will be to be as precise as possible, and then land on the ground when you're done. All right, hovering under goggles. No difference in hovering with goggles. It's actually a little easier than line of sight. But what I like to do is pick out a target. In this case, I've chosen a tree. And then what you're gonna do, trees aren't really great. A fence does offer, like a 2-level fence or something that has levels that you can focus on, is a better obstacle to look at while hovering. But in the tree, so I'm gonna take off. I'm gonna hover at this tree. This tree has a little bit of a mound, so what I'm gonna do is pick the base of the mound, and I'm just gonna hover and try and maintain the same position and altitude while focusing on the base of the tree. Just pick something and stare at it. And you can get closer to work more precision. And in this situation with goggles on, you can also do your, you know, your left, your right, your nose in, stuff like that. But you get the picture. Hovering with goggles, far easier than hovering line of sight. However you build, this is personal opinion, professional opinion, based on years of experience, learning to hover and fly line of sight will greatly improve your overall skill level and will bring your skill level up more quickly. That's my assessment. So that's it. Hope this is helpful. I'm going to continue to do these, and you guys will see the next installment soon. Later.